Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is Understanding and Respecting Gender, a guide for faculty and professional staff. Today's presenter is Christine Chacko. She is a CPA and Director of Finance and Administration in the Office of Research and Innovation and the A.J. Drexel Autism Institute. While we're waiting for a few more folks microphones to turn on, let me just plug a couple of quick Tuesday topics that we have coming up. I've just dropped into the chat the direct link for Tuesday topics, so you can go visit out on the web and register for any of these events that might be of interest to you. Next week, we've got CNHP PhD programs, postdoctoral pathways, which will be a nice panel of some recent alumni to talk about their pathways. And then the week after that, we have Meet the CNHP Board of Global Healthcare Engagement. And then the week after that, ethically speaking, vaccine testing, approval, and distribution. I think that's going to be a very important conversation about the ethics surrounding vaccine production and distribution to maybe allay some of our concerns and fears. All right. Take it away, Christine.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I am really excited to be here. Let me share my screen. All right, welcome everyone. I think I forgot to change the title on here, but it is a guide for faculty and professional staff, and also all are welcome. Let's get started here. All right, understanding gender. Defining what gender is very difficult. Understandings of what gender is are constantly changing. 2015 Fusion Millennial poll of adults age 18 to 34 found that the majority see gender as a spectrum, not a binary. And another 2015 research study found that 56% of those from 13 to 20 years old know someone who identifies as gender neutral and uses neutral pronouns such as they or them. If these are new concepts to anybody, don't worry, we'll be talking about that soon. It's hard for those who have kind of grown up with the concept of gender as a binary to sometimes wrap their heads around it being different, but we'll talk about why it is important to kind of expand a more limited view of gender and explore gender with new eyes and kind of ask questions about it. Oh, and I forgot to say, by the way, ideally save all your questions till the end, but if you've got something quick, feel free to pop it in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function and unmute yourself and ask a question. So this is a visual I like to use called the Genderbread person. It's available at genderbread.org, created by Sam Killerman. It kind of explains the different aspects of a person. There's gender identity, gender expression, anatomical or biological sex, sexual attraction and romantic attraction, and none of these things are the same as any of the others. None of them necessarily determines any of the others. There is a ton of information on this website if you want to take a look at any point, but they're all of these aspects of the person are independent of each other and not necessarily connected. Today, we're going to focus on identity, gender identity. What is gender identity? Well, let's see. It is technically an association with being any degree of male and or female or neither. It is something that is self-identified and self-determined. Everybody chooses their own gender identity, whether consciously or unconsciously, and it's not determined by anyone else. And it is a spectrum in the current understanding. And this is one visualization of how that spectrum might appear. What it is not is how you perceive someone else. You can't assign somebody else's gender identity. It's not how somebody dresses. Like I might dress in a more feminine way or more masculine way, but that does not determine my gender identity. And it's not necessarily a fixed point for everyone or in every situation. Sometimes people's gender identity may change. Um, it's not a binary. Not everyone identifies as male or female. You may have heard the terms gender neutral, gender queer, agender. There are a lot of different identities out there. How is gender identity expressed? In the most simple terms, it's expressed through pronouns. I use the pronoun she, her. You might hear the term PGP, which refers to personal gender pronouns. These are the pronouns that an individual chooses for themselves that they use to correspond with their gender identity. You might have heard PGP stand for preferred gender pronouns. In general, that is less acceptable because it's like people try to stay away from the idea that like your pronouns are a preference because they really are your identity. These are some examples of pronouns. The she, her, hers are typically female, he, him, his are male, and they, them, and they here are typical gender neutral pronouns, but they are not the only ones out there. There are tons of different pronouns. You can go to this website down here, transstudent.org, for more examples. And I think this is where I have my first video. Oh, I might have forgotten to check, share my audio. Let's see if I can do that. Do I have to unshare and reshare?
Yeah, I think that's the only way to get the window back up.
Okay. Let's do that. Oh, it was checked anyway. All right. Can you see the YouTube?
Yep.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Gender identity. Your gender identity is a way to describe how you feel about your gender. This is one's internal sense of self as a man, woman, both, neither, or something else. Gender neutrality. Gender neutrality is all about not making assumptions on someone's gender identity based on the way they look or act. Okay, so now we've got the definitions down, let's take a look at some of the most common gender neutral pronouns.
And we actually will not do that right now. But just that was just a brief explainer about how the binary is not really used anymore for gender. Why is gender identity important and important to consider? Gender is really as integral to our identity as our names. Some folks don't really have to think about it, but for some folks, they have to think about it all the time and every day. It is really as important to consider somebody's gender identity as it is to get their name right. And just like getting their name right shows someone professional respect, in the same way, so does getting their pronouns right. It's especially important for those of us in student-facing positions, and for students to feel comfortable, especially students who don't use he or she pronouns, to be in an environment where they're asked what their pronouns are up front, and to be with like a teacher or advisor or whoever who consistently uses their pronouns correctly, that can really determine at very early stages of a relationship if a student feels comfortable and feels respected and feels welcomed. It's really important to creating a welcoming environment. All of us are really responsible for setting an example. I say especially in leadership positions, but really everyone is a leader and everyone is a role model for somebody. And correctly using other people's pronouns really sets a tone of respect and allyship. And your colleagues and students especially don't take that for granted. It can really make a difference, especially for incoming students that can feel particularly vulnerable, friendless, and scared. And the same with, new employees, or new anybody new to a space can feel vulnerable. So it's really important to show them that, you care. I think I'm going to switch to the second video now.
Gender is a universe. It is a broad spectrum of planets and stars and sky that truly cannot be contained into a binary.
My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and that's a non-negotiable. And they were all kind of like, okay.
I think one of the main reasons pronouns are so important is because other than our name, it's one of the main ways that people identify and call us.
My pronouns are personally very important to me. Growing up, enculturated into kind of a system that really subscribes to toxic masculinity, I was always uncomfortable with being called dude, what's up, man. I was so bad at dapping people up, like, how like guys like do that whole like that thing. I was so bad at that, and it just I felt very alienated every time someone would do that to me.
So when someone identifies with a pronoun, they're essentially taking their little piece of that broad universe and identifying with that. And so in using their correct pronouns, we're validating that yes, you are right in your identity and you are important and we're respecting you.
Coming into terms with my genderqueer identity has been one of the most challenging but also rewarding things that I've done.
Laverne Cox kind of famously said, misgendering a trans person is an act of violence. And it is. It's an act of psychological violence. It's a denial of somebody's personhood and a complete refusal to acknowledge their identity, whether intentional or not.
And so it is something that is entirely wrapped around our everyday lives. So just walking into a restaurant and hearing someone say she, will happen within 2 seconds of me entering, which doesn't happen about any of my other identities. They're not gonna be like, oh, you straight person, that doesn't happen. But automatically someone will make assumptions about gender, which translate into pronouns, which mean that I will hear over and over again people saying something about my identity, which is false.
I think a lot of people associate expression with identity, and sometimes that's not the case. Oftentimes I'm in situations where I'm not the most safe being able to express my gender identity, and in those cases, even in those instances where I'm wearing basketball shorts or sneakers, you can't take my gender identity away from me because that's mine and not yours.
So many different options for who you are and how to define that. So when someone chooses a personal pronoun that they identify with, using that pronoun is a form of respect and a form of validation that, yes, this is your rightful identity and I will respect that.
And I know personally when I get misgendered by strangers, it's one thing, but it's especially painful when it's people who are close to you. So when my parents misgender me, it's a knife in my heart because they're the people whose opinions matter more to me than anybody else's.
And not knowing how to combat it. It is constant, and it is such a prevalent part of our society that being misgendered happens countless times in a day, and that builds up really quickly, and it can really be difficult for a person to hear over and over again because it invalidates your identity over and over and over again.
Pronouns are important because they are the smallest and easiest way that you can acknowledge somebody's identity.
And I also don't like that people call them their preferred pronouns because it's also not a preference. It's who they are. You need to use those pronouns. It's literally an extension of my arm or my leg. It's just as a part of me as a vital organ.
All right, so we're going to talk about how misgendering people might affect them on that note. And the link to that video is in the resources at the end of this presentation, so you can watch the whole thing if you want. Misgendering somebody, especially when that happens on a consistent basis, it's similar to getting their name wrong. Like if somebody calls me Christina every time they interact with me instead of Christine, like it's a little irritating, but actually getting my gender identity wrong would feel even worse to me. And for some people, it can take a huge toll on their mental health, especially if it happens all the time. On the lower end of the spectrum of a toll, it can lead to disrespect. They can feel hurt. They can feel, invalidated or dismissed. They can also feel unsafe. This can be anything from feeling physically unsafe in the space where they are, or just unable to be themselves, unable to express their opinions, to speak up in class, speak up in meetings. They can feel unable to do their job because they don't feel like a person who, you know, is respected and validated by everybody else in the same way that the other people whose pronouns are constantly right are. They can feel alienated and uncomfortable, and they can feel dysphoric. It really is a privilege for those of us who don't have to think about which pronoun people are going to use for us based on how they perceive our genders. If you have this privilege, but you fail to respect someone else's gender identity, it is disrespectful and hurtful, but it's also ultimately oppressive. It contributes to an environment where other people feel unable to express themselves fully, and where they can feel unsafe. So it really is important to get people's pronouns right. We can talk about some ways to respect other people's gender identities. First, what not to do. Never assume somebody's gender, linking appearance or expression to their identity, i.e. like the way that they dress or the way that they do their hair. And never assume that that means that they use certain pronouns. This is one that, you know, sometimes takes a while, but with a lot of practice gets really easy. Avoid addressing groups with terms like "hey ladies" or "hey guys." I know "hey guys" is a really tough one to break, but it can be really damaging to people. Also, don't be afraid to make a mistake. We all make mistakes every day, all the time. Just accept that it'll happen, and try your best the next time. Apologize if necessary. Try not to comment out of turn on people's clothing choices, especially for those whose gender identity is like very much not linked with their gender expression or the clothes that they wear. It can really make people uncomfortable to have their clothing commented on, especially by people they don't necessarily know very well. Also, don't stop learning. There are always new understandings and new discussions about gender, and being able to keep your mind open and learn about those is a way to show respect. What to do instead? Ask. If you don't know somebody's pronouns, it's always okay to ask. Like, "oh, what pronouns do you use?" Or you can just say, "I use she, her pronouns. What pronouns do you use?" And asking, especially, you know, with taking that person's level of comfort into account, it really helps to normalize the behavior of not making assumptions. Use gender neutral terms for groups. Instead of, hey guys, say hey all, hey folks, hey people, hey team, something like that. One thing that I have noticed while while bringing people in for interviews or for co-ops and things like that, people don't generally put their pronouns on their resumes, so you don't know what pronouns they use until you meet them perhaps and ask them. So I always try to refer to them by a neutral pronoun until I know for sure. Think about options not involving clothing for small talk. If that's what you usually go to for, like, hey, your hair looks really nice, or hey, I love that blazer, or whatever. Just, when in doubt, or when you're not sure if you're close enough with a person to really to bring up their clothing unsolicited, talk about the weather. That's always a good one. Talk about the pandemic. There are a lot of choices out there that are less personal than somebody's gender expression. If you make a mistake, just apologize and try not to do it again. If you hear somebody else making a mistake, like misgendering someone else, usually it's fine to kind of like gently correct them. You might take them aside or do it privately and say, actually, that person prefers the pronoun they or she. And it's really most important to check in with the person who was misgendered and say, like, I noticed that so and so referred to you, or you had been referred to with the wrong pronouns earlier. I know that can be hurtful. Are you okay? Do you want me to say something to them? Would you be okay with me taking them aside and reminding them, or blah, blah, blah? And just like make sure that your behavior is informed by the person, the comfort level of the person being misgendered. And really, take your cues from them, because ultimately you want to make sure that that group or meeting or classroom or whatever is a safe space for that person. Oh yeah, and we just talked about this. I am gonna go to the last video.
Never assume a pronoun. If you're meeting someone for the first time and don't know which pronoun to use, just ask the person you're chatting to. It'll go a little something like this. Hello, new human that I'm meeting in a pub. I'm Libby. Nice to meet you, Libby. I'm Alex. If you don't mind me asking, Alex, what pronouns do you use? Good question, Libby. I use they, them. What about you? Well, thanks for asking. I use she, her. Anyway, should we get a pint? It's that simple. And if you're meeting a bunch of people, you can apply the same gender-neutral language. Instead of saying ladies or guys, try to incorporate language that isn't gendered, such as folks, pals, or friends. Basically, just don't go around assuming pronouns. Don't be that person. Of course, there might be times when you slip up and get a pronoun wrong. We get it, mistakes happen. Don't make a big deal out of it, say sorry, correct yourself, and move on. The best apology is not doing it again. An even better apology is to become an ally. If you overhear someone using the wrong pronouns for a mutual friend, correct them. Be the ally that the non-binary, genderqueer, and trans people in your community deserve. You should also bring your new ally status to work. Encourage your colleagues to start using their preferred gender pronouns at the start of meetings, or include a place for pronouns on your name tags or badges. You can even buy pre-made pronoun stickers, and they are pretty damn fabulous. This will all help towards normalising the idea that people shouldn't just assume that they can tell someone's pronoun based on the traditional gendering of a name. So there you have it. Thank you for watching our
and I'll send that link out as well. And someone pointed out, instead of saying, this person prefers that pronoun, you should say this person uses that pronoun. That's true. And let's see. Next. Oh, yeah. OED actually has a really good allyship training online. You can search for it in Career Pathway, and I think I have the name of it on the last slide. Here are some tips for practicing pronouns and getting other people's pronouns right. Depending on, how you learn or what specifically you're having trouble with, some of these might work better for you than others. Sometimes it might be good to practice pronouns, maybe practice for one specific person, just take the time to learn in private. Always use pronouns during introductions. I know not everyone necessarily feels comfortable sharing their pronouns, but if you start out, or even if you're like the 5th or 10th or whatever person to introduce yourself, if you say your pronouns, that might help make other people comfortable ultimately. And it helps to normalize, like, this is a normal thing to say and to do, is to introduce yourself with pronouns. Make it a habit when you're like meeting somebody one-on-one to ask and offer your pronouns. Speak slowly. I often have trouble with that, but it's easy to get things wrong when you're rushed or when you're not paying attention. Really give yourself time to focus on who you're talking to and what you're saying, because pronouns are important. This one I think is another one for those, to do on your own. Chant silently to yourself, like, that person uses these pronouns, and just say that over and over to yourself until you don't have to think about it anymore. When in doubt, use they or another neutral pronoun, and learn to question gender and kind of like force yourself out of a box that maybe you're used to being in, of thinking about gender as a more binary thing. Just practice seeing gender in ways outside of your usual associations, and that will kind of help you get to a place where you don't necessarily think of it in a binary. And I'll send these out, but here are a bunch of resources. Drexel has this faculty and professional staff network. I'm not sure how active it is, because I went on that website and I didn't see any recent updates. There are student life resources. There is, for those who are back on campus, a list of single person restrooms for those who don't feel comfortable using like a designated male or designated female bathroom. And I believe in the Drexel libraries, they actually have signs on all of the restrooms that say anyone of any gender can use any bathroom. And here are a few videos for people to watch. And if other folks know of resources that have been particularly helpful, please feel free to share them in the chat. And other than that, I'll open it up for questions, comments, anything anybody wants to share. And thank you.
Christine, I'll say really quickly, the ally training through OED was really great. I was happy to go to it, even someone that identifies as part of the LGBTQ+ community. But what I really love about it, once we're back in the office, is that they do provide the dragon ally, like kind of ally sticker or plaque that you put outside your office or your cubicle or whatever. And it's just a really great kind of visual where, if you're working in an office environment and you have that ally sticker there on your, door or your cubicle or whatnot, it's a good visual for people to see that, you're an ally, you've gone, maybe they won't know you went through the training, but that you are an ally at the university and you're a safe space for those people. Same with your signatures. I have my pronouns in my signature, just so that it makes others comfortable knowing that, I'm giving you my pronouns. You're more than welcome to share your pronouns with me, as well. And just, a safe space is created for, for anyone.
Yeah, thank you. It is, I think, really important to, for those who are comfortable, to share your pronouns in your email signature. One, to kind of help normalize sharing pronouns, and two, to prevent being misgendered by anyone. And I think actually OED does, like, you can take the web version of that allyship training, but they will also come to your office and do like a tailored version of that for your team or your office if you want them to as well.
So Christine, so thank you again for your presentation. I really appreciated it immensely. So you had mentioned earlier about if someone does misgender or misidentify or misstate someone's pronoun, that they should just say, I'm sorry, and grow from that. How is the person supposed to also respond in the event that the person who received the misgender or misidentity, and it gets kind of a scolded position? How can the person who was in error in the first place receive that, or what should they say back? Because sometimes that happens. The person, I'm not, you misidentified me or whatever, and then the person feels a little, sort of defensive or whatever. So how could that how could that person respond?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough to not be defensive when you have been misgendered, or when somebody is saying like, hey, you made a mistake and you misgendered this person. I think it's a natural reaction for a lot of us to be defensive. But I really, I'll go back to open-mindedness. I think it's a great way to show respect for each other. And it's hard sometimes for a person who has been constantly misgendered to even hear an apology also, which is why I say it's best to sometimes like privately check in with them and just say, hey, are you okay? Is there anything you need? And sometimes they'll say, no, I'm good. Or, no, I have to deal with this myself. And they might be defensive, and that's their right. Like, they have the right to feel whatever they want to feel. And you can only, you can only do as much as you can do with considering the comfort level of that person. Again, I hope that was helpful. Yeah, when you make a mistake and somebody corrects you, yeah, it's sometimes just best to say, thank you, I'll try better next time, or thanks, I'll remember that. And maybe not even apologize, depending on the situation. And again, like all of these things, I think you kind of have to consider your personal relationship with the parties involved, because the conversation, I think, can be quite different depending on that. Dr. Carey, do you have anything to add about that?
No, I just wanted to hear from your voice to give people the ability to move their feet, right? Because oftentimes, people might take part in something like this and then not know how to, so you were sharing about how to apologize, but not really how to receive it in the event the person in that moment, is, and I appreciate that you'd also mentioned about using gender or using neutral pronouns such as they and them, or their, but then that also could be taken as, well, it's she or he. So I just wanted people to be able to have both sort of opportunities to kind of learn, yes, say I'm sorry, but also if someone's sort of, taken aback by that, how to respond after that taken aback moment. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I will, to clarify, I use neutral pronouns, like if I'm talking about somebody who I haven't met yet, like when they are not present. But then when I do meet them, I find out their pronouns so that I can refer to them in person using the correct ones. Oh, Angel, were you raising your hand or just saying hi?
I was raising my hand. Sorry, I just wanted to quickly jump in. I can speak from the point of view of someone who unfortunately did misgender someone that I was working with, someone that I had been working with in the arts community for some time, and I knew, and I just was in a situation where I just had a momentary blip and I misgendered them, and they didn't say anything in the moment. We were in a car together with others, and they were kind enough to wait until we were alone and say, listen, I just want to correct you. These are my pronouns. And this was several years ago, but where it wasn't quite talked about quite as much, but I knew better. And I was taken aback because I felt like I was some sort of, warrior of justice. And I said, I said, thank you. And I apologized, and that was it. And, we remained friends, but I appreciate that moment of really feeling kind of taken aback. And the best thing is to just, thank them and apologize.
It's important to remember, if you are the person who has accidentally misgendered somebody, it's not about you. It's never going to be about you. Especially in that situation, like you are the person in a position of privilege, and you need to remember, like, it's about making the other person comfortable. How do we attend to pronouns in writing from a grammatical perspective? Is that referring to like the practice of using they for a single person, and how that may or may not be viewed as proper grammar?
Yes, that's what I was asking.
Okay. I mean, nowadays, yes, it is perfectly common practice to use they, written or spoken, to refer to a single person. I think they're teaching that in a lot of public schools also. Like, it's not something negative or something to be corrected. It is actually common practice just to say they when that is somebody's pronoun, or like even, in job ads when they're describing a position or whatever, he/she, you used to see a lot of the time, will be responsible for doing XYZ. Nowadays, you'll see they will be responsible for doing XYZ, and you'll just know from context that it refers to one person. So it is considered grammatically correct in common parlance, at least.
Okay, thank you.
I will say too, Christine, Roberta, I see some of my HR folks on here. I know that they spent a lot of time last year going through like our Drexel policies and things like that to remove those he, she pronouns and going into, they and them. I know from an HR perspective, looking at our job descriptions, making sure that our job descriptions are accessible to everyone, and that they have, they, them pronouns, so that we're not excluding anyone, any future applicants or anything like that. I'm not sure if that's already in place, but I know that that's something that's going to happen. And I also just want to say, like, we have this onus to go and educate ourselves on these topics, because it's not just people who have preferred pronouns or anything like that, but there's a lot of deep-rooted trauma with individuals and pain there. And, there may be a reaction from someone, when we misgender them or something like that. But we have to understand, like Christine said, it's not about us, it's about them. And, whatever pain comes with that. So we have to know that their reaction is because of, there may be some deep-rooted trauma and pain. And so I think education is good. It goes beyond just knowing to say they, them, but we also need to like educate ourselves as to like, why is this apparent now? Why do we have preferred pronouns? That there's just a whole history behind it. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking recently I wrote an article, and the person that I was writing about uses they, them. And when I was writing about them, the they is what always kind of trips me up a little bit, because when you're writing something about he, she, they in a job description, you say are, and that's fine, right? Grammatically. So that's what I was asking about.
Ah, got it. Yeah. I still, every time I say they, I use are. Yeah.
Right. And that can be, in my opinion, that can also be minimizing, because, they is a single individual. And then if you're using they are, you've just made them into a group. So I guess that's what I was thinking, or not a group, but more than one person.
I mean, not necessarily, because they kind of, like, going back to seeing gender identity as a spectrum, they kind of encompasses, like, they might be multiple points on that spectrum or those spectrums. People like to say beyond the binary, like they don't just identify as one, as male or as female, or like as this point on the male to female spectrum or something. They really are beyond the binary, and some folks really like to see it as that instead of as a limiting kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned using y'all as a plural pronoun. That was my transition when I went from hey guys, I went directly to hey y'all. But that was when I was working in a small nonprofit, and yes, it was much less exactly, Jacob. It was a lot less, a lot more acceptable, I think, in that context. I've transitioned at Drexel to saying hey all instead of y'all a lot of the time, depending on the group I'm talking to. But yeah, friends is another good one, or folks, or people, or a team. Yeah, anything like that. Just try different things out and kind of see what feels natural to you. Paul asked, oh, if you use they for a single person, that's been the convention so far, is to not use is unless it matches the original pronoun. But I don't know, that's something that could change as well. Maybe we're on the cusp of that changing.
Well, I think this also the problem that Roberta was referring to, that we're currently in between. So we're neither one way or the other. There's nothing wrong with, there would be no problem with just using they as a universal pronoun, but then not adapting verbs to a plural form. And eventually, hopefully, those of us who can get used to hearing they for a single person can get used to hearing they is, because they is actually much clearer than they are, because then only one half of the copula is universal, the other one is specific. It is telling you that you're talking about. So just get over hearing they is, rather than hearing are referring to a single person and wondering whether it's referring to a single person or not. So what I'm saying is that this will evolve to the point where it will be clear.
Yeah.
And it'll probably evolve by people just getting used to hearing they with single verb forms. It's that will be the mature form of all this. Many pidgins have gender neutral pronouns. The one I like is um. Works perfectly for everything. He's in house. Um's in house. Come to house. See him walking by.
That's
We
extremely
use it. You know, often we use them without knowing. See him walking by.
Yep. Sherry, did you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you, Christine. I have a question about the terms non-binary and gender neutral. I see them often used almost interchangeably, but something in my brain is telling me they're not actually the same. And I wonder if you could talk about that more.
Yeah, I mean, they are not necessarily the same. You can definitely Google and come up with different definitions of a lot of these terms. I think I probably say most often just gender nonconforming as a more universal term. But yeah, non-binary and gender neutral are not necessarily the same, and people who identify as one may not identify as the other. I think to most people I know, it's really like a personal kind of thing as to how they define it. Yeah, I don't really know how to address the difference there, but there is a difference, I think. And then, yeah, genderqueer is another word that kind of also encompasses something else, especially as queer doesn't necessarily always relate to gender and sometimes relates to sexual orientation. It kind of brings in another element there. yeah, there are a lot of complex relationships, I think, between these words. I would suggest starting out with that, the Genderbread website. That'll kind of give you some of the basic terminology. I hope that was a little bit helpful.
I thought, Dr. Goodall, that's a great question. Because when I think of non-binary, I think of not just male or female sex. When I think of gender neutral or gender, I think about the acculturated ways people have been raised, or, you know, in terms of girl, boy, or man, woman. And they're saying that I don't conform with either one of those. So that's where I go to when I hear those two terms. For my ability to kind of separate them. It doesn't mean that you're going to find this anywhere in the world. It could be a Dr. Carey moment, but that's how I kind of differentiate them. So if someone says non-binary, I'm thinking, okay, in terms of sex, how that, you know, male, female, and then gender neutral, okay, man, woman, girl, boy. That's where I kind of go to when I hear those two terms. If that's helpful, it could be just my moment, but that's where but I thought that was a great question.
Yeah, thank you. And before I forget, I'm gonna drop this short survey into the chat. If folks wouldn't mind filling that out, I would really appreciate the feedback. And I'm also going to drop the Genderbread site into the chat. Anyone have any last questions or comments?
Great. Well, thank you so much. Let's have a big round of applause for Christine. That was terrific. And please register to join us for the next Tuesday topic. I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.